Hey everybody, Jim here with another top 5 for you today. Because last time I did a top 5, it was top 5 Capcom games on the SNES, and a handful of people commented that I should give Konami the same treatment, which I thought was a good idea, because pretty much my two favorite developers at the time were Konami and Capcom. So yes, makes perfect sense. Let's do a top 5 Konami games on the SNES. And I was gonna do like a longer, maybe like honorable mentions thing, but there's like, I don't know, there's just so many, because anything that had the Konami logo on it on the SNES was really good. So before I get started with the top 5 proper, I will just say Mystical Ninja, Tiny Toon Adventures, Axlay, Sunset Riders for sure, and even though it was only published by Konami, it wasn't developed by them, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, which I'll say that Sunset Riders, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, both games were not released in Japan, and it's soul crushing that I cannot play those on my Super Famicom, so I'm gonna have to get some ROMs or something like that, or import. I'm gonna have to import some games. I'm gonna have to import Zombies Ate My Neighbors and Sunset Riders. How do you like that? I'm gonna import them from North America. Won't that be fun? Okay, so those are the honorable mentions out of the way. Let's get started with my top 5. And number 5, we're gonna get started with TMNT Tournament Fighters. This game is awesome. As a kid, I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan, and I was also a big fan at the time of fighting games. Had really gotten into Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 2 as well. I was loving both of those games. So when someone's like, hey, here's a fighting game with Ninja Turtles characters, my head exploded. It exploded with excitement. I was so happy to see a fighting game that more or less mirrored the gameplay style of Street Fighter, but you had all the turtles and then a bunch of other characters too that I didn't really recognize. Some of the other, like, the villainous characters, like I think like Chrome Dome and Wingnut. I hadn't really been, I guess, following Turtles at that point in time, but, you know, I was hoping to see more characters, like maybe like Casey Jones, Bebop and Rocksteady, or Ground Chuck, Dirtbag. Some of the ones I was more familiar with, but still, you know, great roster of characters. Gameplay was pretty solid. It's essentially, again, like kind of like mirrored the control scheme of a Street Fighter game. Except it was Ninja Turtles. Didn't play quite as well as Street Fighter, but still pretty good. You know, Konami, they weren't exactly known for like making these like great fighting games or anything at the time. But Tournament Fighters on the SNES is a really good 16-bit fighter. Not so much the one of the Genesis. I actually really don't like that game, but I like this one a lot because it plays pretty good. The graphics are outstanding. This is a beautiful game. Like, it's absurdly colorful, so I love the graphics. The soundtrack is awesome. Every game that I'm going to talk about today has a great soundtrack. Konami was just like, you know, that was like their wheelhouse, making great soundtracks. Forget about it. It's like, it's a given. It's going to have a great soundtrack. So beautiful graphics, amazing soundtrack, really fun gameplay, and it's just awesome to be playing as the Ninja Turtles in a fighting game. And you had multiple gameplay modes. You had a tournament mode where you could play as all the different characters, but then there was also a really cool story mode where you just pick one of the 4 turtles and then you burn through the story mode, so that was cool too. Plus there's a versus mode and a watch mode, which I never found any use for really, but if you just want to sit there and like watch the gameplay itself, you can do that. But yeah, TMNT, for a fan at the time of fighting games and Ninja Turtles, this was just like a dream come true. Really fantastic game. And in fact, if I had to make a top 5 of my favorite fighting games on the SNES, this one would definitely be in there. I would put it in there with Super Street Fighter 2, Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat 2, TMNT, and then, I don't know, I'd think about another one, maybe like Fatal Fury Special or something. But this is a really great 2D fighter, and it's filled with that turtley goodness. How can you go wrong? TMNT, Tournament Fighters, my number 5 Konami game on the SNES. For number 4, I decided to go with one of the all-time great run-and-guns, the game that pushed Sunset Riders off the list, and that is Contra 3, The Alien Wars. This game is the quintessential, like, side-scrolling run-and-gun action game. It's just like, it's one of those things where, like, you hear the expression balls to the wall, and that's this game. You're just constantly running and shooting and destroying everything, and just enemies left and right, bullets here and there. It's hard as hell, but it's so much fun, especially when you get some of the weapon power-ups like the spread shot, the almighty spread shot, but you also get the homing missiles, and then the really powerful missiles that take down bosses really quickly. That's all good. And then you get the flame and the laser as well. All that good stuff. All the power-ups you want. Super bombs, which are awesome. You just blow away everything on screen. That's great. Multiplayer is fantastic. Like one of the best 2-player games you can play on the SNES. Graphics amazing. I love the boss designs in this game. They're awesome. Like, I remember playing this game for the first time and getting to the first stage boss, the giant turtle thing, and just being like, holy hell, this is awesome. So like, just great graphics, great use of like mode 7 and stuff like that, sprite scaling, all that good stuff. Even the top-down sections that most people, don't really care for. I don't mind those so much. They're obviously nowhere near as fun as the side-scrolling segments, but at least they're used kind of sparingly, right? There's only like 2 of those sections in the game. But aside from that, this is an amazing game. Again, some of the most fun you can have with 2 players on the SNES. Just full-on action-packed gameplay. It's fun every time. You can play through this game over and over and over again, and it never gets boring. Which is weird for a game that, with such a simple premise. You just run through, kill everything, you finish it in like 45 minutes, but you just start over again and it's fun again. So Contra 3, The Alien Wars, amazing gameplay, beautiful graphics, and another soundtrack that just kicks all kinds of ass. I especially love some of the influences from other things. Like, definitely I can hear influences from the soundtracks to like Predator and Aliens and stuff. So that's really great stuff. So Contra 3, The Alien Wars, it's the total package. It's one of those just like perfect 16-bit action games. Can't get enough of it. Yeah, Contra 3, The Alien Wars, amazing game, and my number 4 favorite Konami game on the SNES. For number 3, I decided to go with one of my favorite shoot-'em-ups on the console, and probably one of my favorite shoot-'em-ups of the 16-bit generation, and that's Gradius III. This game is awesome if you are a shoot-'em-up fan and a Gradius fan, which I definitely am. I love that this game took essentially what was already like really awesome about Gradius and Gradius 2, and then just like punch it up to 11. Like, they said about a lot of these games, it's like, now you're playing with superpower. It took Gradius and then like superpowered it, so you have a bunch of different power-up chains to choose from. So you can have like the original Gradius, or you can get power-ups from Gradius 2 or other ones. So that's really cool. You can have your different kind of like force fields. You can choose between 2 of those. And then the gameplay itself, even though, I will say this, even though there is a ton of slowdown in this game, you got to remember that this was one of the earliest games released for the SNES, and being like sort of a conversion of the arcade game as well. There was always going to be a lot of slowdown because it's Gradius. There's lots of stuff going on. There's enemies, and there's bullets, and there's alien things, and monsters. There's so much going on. There's going to be some slowdown, and I got to be honest, I'm happy there's a slowdown because this is, it's a Gradius game. It's a difficult shooter. I mean, there are numerous difficulty settings to choose from, so you can choose easy and have an easier time and stuff. But eventually, you're going to run into a brick wall in this game if you're not super experienced with like Gradius games or shoot-'em-ups in general. So it is a challenging game. There's a lot of slowdown, and I'm happy there is because I have seen people basically take this card, do something to it, or do something to the ROM to remove all of the slowdown, and the game becomes like almost impossible because there's just too much going on. So I appreciate that slowdown. Thank you very much. But the gameplay itself is super fun, super challenging, just super like responsive controls, lots of power-ups to choose from, lots of enemies, bullets, really great boss battles, and again, graphics fantastic, and the soundtrack it's just amazing. Every Gradius game has like just outstanding music, and Gradius 3 is no exception. The music in this game, probably some of my favorite on the console, and I don't know if I should say that because I could say that about like every game on this list. Konami just knocked it out of the park with 16-bit music, but the Gradius 3 soundtrack is awesome. Like, there's nothing for me to complain about with this game. It's one of my favorite 16-bit shooters. It might just be one of my favorite shoot-'em-ups ever in general. It's just one of those ones, like Contra 3, no matter how many times I played through it, I'm like, okay, that was fun. Reset, start again. It's just, it has a certain je ne sais quoi about it, but Gradius 3 on the SNES, just an amazing game all around, despite the flaws, so to speak, despite all the slowdown. Gameplay amazing, graphics amazing, sound design amazing. Just one of my go-to SNES games. Just pure perfection right here. You may disagree, and that's fine, but if you ask me, Gradius III, it's pretty damn good. And that's why it's number 3 on my Konami SNES list. For number 2, we already had Tournament Fighters on the list, so why not throw some more Turtles on there? Of course, it is TMNT Turtles in Time. This is... it's hard to describe like how fun and how good this game is. It definitely, in my opinion, it is the best beat 'em up on the SNES, and I would go so far as to say it's the best 16-bit beat 'em up. I mean, I would play this before any Final Fight game, before any Streets of Rage game. I mean, you name it, I would play this first. Turtles, like I said, with Contra 3 and with Gradius 3, this is one of those games where if I play it and I beat it, if I'm in the mood, I'll just reset and start again, because it's unbelievably fun. The controls are amazing. It's challenging, but not too challenging. It's so satisfying beating up all of those foot soldiers. The additional kinds of stages like sewer surfing is fun, and the Neon Knight Rider stage, good lord, I love that stage. So there's just like, I don't know, the gameplay for me in this game is perfect, and again, like Contra 3, this is some of the most fun you can have with 2 players on the SNES. It's hard for me to articulate just how much I loved this game as a kid. Never owned it as a kid, but we rented it like, I don't know how many weekends, and just like sitting there and playing it with my sister, and just like playing it and beating it, and then she gets tired of it and she goes off to do something else or to go to sleep, and I'll just stay up and I'll just play it by myself and keep beating it by myself because I loved everything about it. The gameplay was just super satisfying, so amazing. All the boss battles are great. I mean, all the characters they crammed into this thing. You got your Baxter Stockman and Metalhead and Bebop and Rocksteady, Toka and Razor, the Super Shredder. I mean, it's just like stacked with all these great boss battles, all these, you know, enemies that I recognize from my era of the show, all the foot soldiers and the Mousers, and it's so great. It's hard to overstate how much I like Turtles in Time. And gameplay aside, the gameplay is perfect. I wouldn't change anything about the gameplay. The graphics and sound are just outstanding. I mean, the representation of the Turtles here is great. They look exactly like you want them to look. All the enemies look amazing. I mean, the boss characters, it's just nice big sprites, lots of detail, looks great, looks just like the cartoon. And the stage design's fantastic. The Mode 7 effects when you're doing Neon Knight Riders, that's brilliant. So just an amazing looking game. And the soundtrack, again, I keep saying this, one of my favorites on the SNES or of the entire 16-bit generation. Every stage has an amazing track to it. There's a 16-bit, after you beat the game, you get a 16-bit rendition of Pizza Power. Who can argue with that? Who can argue with that? And, you know, I'm probably just going to go ahead and use it for this video. The Neon Knight Riders track, I love it. It's fantastic. One of my favorite pieces of video game music ever, really. I've used it a ton in the past. If you've watched any of my videos, you've heard this song a million times. Anyway, I'm going on and on and on. But, again, just like the previous ones, I'll say it. Gameplay, perfect. Visuals, perfect. Soundtrack, perfect. Just addictive. It's like fun condensed into a cartridge. TMNT, Turtles in Time, my favorite beat 'em up from the entire 16-bit generation, and my second favorite Konami game on the SNES. For number 1, there's really only one option left, and that is one of my favorite games of all time, and possibly my favorite SNES game, period, and that is Super Castlevania IV. This game, to me, is the perfect action platformer. It's another one of those games where no matter how many times I've beaten it, I'm having fun every time I play it. Like, I can breeze through it. It's like I could play this game in my sleep. I've played it so much, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many times I play it, how many times I beat it. It's always going to be fun because, again, I think it's the perfect action platformer. The controls are just, like, spot on. Like, they couldn't be any better. Like, coming from the 8-bit Castlevania games, and then going to this, where you have so much control over Simon, the jumping is so vastly improved over the 8-bit games. Whipping in all 8 directions is amazing, like, whipping things above you and below you, and diagonally, and swinging on those hooks and things like that. That's all great. The stage designs are fantastic. all the different kinds, the things they did with like Mode 7 and all that kind of stuff, rotating rooms and things like that. That's all well and good. The platforming itself is perfect. Your jumps, the timing and everything, it's all just like, it's so smooth. Like, I don't know how you went from those 8-bit games, which were like really, they're fun, they're great games, but they're like really, really stiff, to this game, which is just the most fluid, smooth, perfect platforming like ever conceived of at the time. So the gameplay is just like, it's perfect. I love all the enemies, the boss battles are great, and you just, I don't know, it doesn't get any better. Like, honestly, I do say that this is potentially my favorite SNES game ever. Its competition only comes from Mega Man X and Zelda Link to the Past. That's kind of like my holy trinity of SNES games. But the gameplay here, it's just start to finish the perfect action platformer. And then on top of that, again, just like everything else on this list, the visuals are amazing. Like, everything in this game, it looks like a work of art. Like, it's so, like, I love that style anyway, the gothic style that is prevalent throughout Castlevania. I love it. Here, it's like, it's perfected. Like, it's so good. Just like, mwah. It has that certain quality to it that wasn't replicated after this. Like, honestly, like Dracula X, if they could have just incorporated more from this game into Dracula X, like if they could have carried over this gameplay style and a little more of this, like this visual style, where like Dracula X, I don't know, in certain parts it feels like a little too bright for me. Like, this game has it has that dank dungeon and dingy old castle feel to it. Like, it feels like when I'm playing through the stages, I'm like, wow, it probably smells horrible in there, because it I don't know, somehow it communicates like that feel through the visuals. So I love the visuals in this game. I love the stage designs are amazing. The enemy designs are great. The boss characters are fantastic. Again, these big sprites and everything. It's just awesome. And the soundtrack, I don't really have to say it at this point. I mean, it's maybe the best soundtrack on the entire console. Like, it is really, really good. All of the original tracks created for this game, and then a lot of the classic tracks that were brought back and updated for later in the game, stuff like Bloody Tears and the Simon Belmont's theme, the Vampire Killer theme. That stuff is just, I mean, it's great. It's beautiful. Like, it's music that like has carried on through like decades and has been like updated and redone over and over and over again. I just can't stop listening to this music. It's some of my favorite video game music of all time, and it's all in this game. So, like, I don't know, I feel like I'm a broken record here, but just like Contra and Gradius and Turtles in Time, perfect gameplay, perfect visuals, perfect sound design, and a game that I never get tired of. I've been playing this game for 30 years, and I am not bored yet. So that's something. That's saying something. So Castlevania IV, just one of my favorite games of all time, and it is my favorite Konami game on the SNES. So there you go, my top 5 Konami games for the SNES. You can let me know down in the comments what you thought about that. Would you have a list similar to mine, or like totally different? Because like, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, when you're talking about Konami games on the SNES, that top 5 could, I mean, it could be anything. All those honorable mentions I said, stuff like Mystical Ninja and Axlay very, nearly made the list, and so did Sunset Riders, because I just love that game. But yeah, I felt pretty comfortable selecting the games that I did, even though, again, when you're talking about Konami, you can really just put any games in there, because they're all great. They all had really great gameplay, visual, sound design. There's not a lot to complain about with 16-bit Konami. I could probably do the same with Genesis as well, just because but there aren't that many Konami games on the Genesis. Yeah, there are quite a few. But that was, another console that had, a lot of love from Konami. Not nearly as much as the SNES, mind you, but still had some great games on it. Castlevania Bloodlines, and Contra Hardcore, and Tiny Toon Adventures, which is like a fantastic game. I don't know why a lot of people don't think of Tiny Toon Adventures when they think Konami, but Konami made some great Tiny Toons games. Anyway, that's going to do it though. So again, let me know down in the comments what your favorite Konami games are on the SNES, or just in general. Hey, let's do that too. And if you would like to see any other kind of top 5s from me, for whatever reason, if you just really are dying to hear my opinion on these things, you can put that in the comments too. So thanks everybody for watching, liking, subscribing, commenting, yada yada yada, etc., etc. And until next time, take care, everybody. Goodbye.